Good morning and welcome back to the Morning Endurance Call. I'm Keith Erwood and this is your daily free 15-minute or less leadership ritual for business owners, executives, and preparedness professionals who want to build stronger businesses, think more clearly under pressure, and lead with clarity in uncertain times. Each weekday morning, we spend a few minutes talking about what it really takes to build stronger businesses, stronger decision making, and stronger leadership in a world where disruption is no longer rare. Today's topic is this: the first 30 minutes of a crisis matter the most. This matters because while a crisis may last hours, days, or even longer, the early moments often shape everything that follows. The first 30 minutes do not always determine the final outcome by themselves, but they often determine the quality of the response. They influence whether the organization begins with clarity or confusion, whether people move with discipline or panic, whether leadership creates alignment or allows fragmentation, whether the business starts managing the situation or the situation starts managing the business. That is why the first 30 minutes matter so much, because early response sets the tone. And in many organizations, that tone often gets set before enough people even realize it's happening. A crisis usually does not begin with perfect information. It begins with partial information. Uncertainty, conflicting reports, assumptions, emotional reactions, questions without full answers, and pressure to act before everything is known. That is exactly why these early moments are so important. Because when information is incomplete, leadership discipline matters even more. If those early minutes are disorganized, delayed, or emotionally reactive, the consequences tend to grow. Not only because of the event itself, but because of how the organization responds to it. And this is one of the most important truths in crisis leadership. The first 30 minutes are often less about solving the whole crisis and more about stabilizing the organization's ability to respond to it well. That is the point. In other words, the first 30 minutes are not usually about having every answer. They are about creating enough structure, clarity, and control that better answers can emerge. That is what strong leadership does early. Now let's make this practical. Why do the first 30 minutes matter so much? First, because they shape the initial understanding. When a disruption begins, the organization needs to know what happened. What do we know so far? What do we not know yet? And what appears to be affected? What is involved? Who's involved? And what is the potential consequence if this worsens? If the business cannot quickly establish even a basic shared understanding, confusion spreads fast. Different people start operating from different assumptions. Leaders hear different versions of the event. Teams make disconnected decisions, and time gets lost. All of that is costly. Second, the first 30 minutes matter because they shape leadership alignment. If key leaders are not aligned early, the organization often fragments. One person may be focused on technical recovery, another on communications, another on customer impact, another on risk containment, another on optics. All of those concerns may be legitimate, but someone has to create alignment around what matters first, who is doing what decisions need to happen now, and how the organization is going to move forward in a coordinated way. That alignment is critical. Third, the first 30 minutes matter because they also shape communication behavior. One of the fastest ways to worsen a crisis is through poor communication. People say too much too early or too little for too long. Messages are inconsistent, updates are unclear, and stakeholders are left guessing. Rumors fill those gaps. Internal teams start operating with different understandings of what is happening. That is why early communication discipline matters so much. The first message does not need to be perfect, but it does need to be clear enough to reduce confusion and reinforce control. Fourth, the first 30 minutes matter because they shape decision quality. Early crisis decisions are often not final decisions, but they can still have a major impact. Do we escalate? Do we activate the team? Do we notify leadership? Do we isolate an issue? Do we communicate externally? Do we shift to workaround mode? Do we pause operations? Do we bring in additional support? These decisions often happen before the organization feels fully ready to make them. That is normal. But if the business has no structure for making early decisions under pressure, then delay, overreaction, or fragmentation can take over. And fifth, the first 30 minutes matter because they also shape emotional tone. People watch leadership early. They pay attention to whether leaders seem grounded or scattered, clear or vague, coordinated or disoriented, disciplined or reactive. Leadership does not need to pretend everything is under control if it is not. But leaders do need to help the organization feel that there is a process for understanding, prioritization, and responding. That steadiness matters because people perform better when uncertainty is being managed, not amplified. Now, here's a point that I want to make. When I say the first 30 minutes matter most, I do not mean leaders should rush recklessly. Speed matters, yes, but speed without clarity can create new or additional problems. The goal is not frantic activity. The goal is disciplined, early action. That means slowing down just enough to ask the right questions. Questions like, what do we know? What is affected? Who needs to be involved right now? What is the immediate business risk? What decisions must happen first and what can wait? How do we create a single operating picture quickly enough to prevent fragmentation? Those are powerful early questions. And the organizations that handle crises better usually have leaders who know how to ask them. Now, what often goes wrong in the first 30 minutes? There's a few common things. Sometimes one of those things is that there's too much hesitation. People wait too long to escalate. They hope the issue will resolve itself. They do not want to overreact, so they delay action until the consequences are already growing. Other times, there's too much activity without enough structure. Everyone starts moving. Messages start flying around. People do things. Calls happen. But no one is truly coordinating the response. Sometimes communication fails. Too many people speak, or no one speaks clearly enough. or key stakeholders are left out, or assumptions are communicated as facts. Sometimes leaders focus too quickly on solving the entire problem before the organization has even stabilized its response structure. That is a common mistake. The business does not always need a complete solution in the first 30 minutes, but it almost always needs a coherent response posture. That is different. So what should leaders focus on in the first 30 minutes? Let's approach this at a really high level on the 5 things that they should focus on. First, establish basic situational clarity. What do we know? And what do we not yet know? Second, align the right people quickly. Who needs to be involved right now? Third, clarify immediate priorities. What matters most in this moment, at this time? Fourth, stabilize communication. Who is communicating? To whom are they communicating? And based on what information? Fifth, create a response rhythm. How will updates, decisions, and coordination happen from here on? That is incredibly important, because once those 5 things begin to stabilize, the organization has a much better chance of handling the next hour very well. And that is really the value of the first 30 minutes. It is not that they solve everything. It is not that they shape what it is whether they shape whether the next phase of the crisis starts with discipline or disorder. It also connects directly to crisis exercises and leadership practice. Boy, I'm really tongue-tied today. You do not want the first time leaders think about these early moments to be during a real crisis. That is why executive tabletop exercises are so valuable. That is why decision-making drills matter, and that is why escalation clarity matters. It's also why communications planning matters. Because if the first 30 minutes it's highly influential. Leaders should practice how to handle them before the pressure becomes real. This also connects to business continuity and IT disaster recovery. Why? Because the earliest crisis decisions often determine whether continuity actions activate quickly enough and whether recovery efforts are aligned properly. And it includes whether stakeholders understand what is actually happening. If early leadership is weak, technical and operational response often becomes weaker too. That is how interconnected this is. And finally, it connects directly to endurance. Because endurance in business is the ability to continue operating, make sound decisions, recover intelligently, and keep moving forward under pressure over time. The first 30 minutes matter to endurance because they are often the moment when the business either begins to create structure under pressure or it begins to lose it. And an enduring business does not assume those early moments will take care of themselves. It prepares leaders to use those moments well. It builds escalation clarity. It builds communication discipline. It builds decision-making structure. And it builds the ability to create alignment quickly. That is one of the ways endurance becomes real. Now, here is a very practical leadership question. If a serious disruption hit your business today, what would the first 30 minutes actually look like? Would the right people know they are needed? And would escalation happen quickly enough? Would decisions be structured? Would communications be clear? Would leadership align early? And would the organization create order, or would it begin in confusion? That question reveals a lot. because the first 30 minutes often expose whether leadership readiness is real or mostly assumed. So here's today's leadership takeaway. The first 30 minutes of a crisis matter most because they often determine whether the organization begins its response with clarity, alignment, disciplined communication, and useful momentum, or with confusion that makes everything harder. That is the point. So here's today's question for you. If your organization had a serious disruption today, would the first 30 minutes strengthen your response or would it weaken it? That is an important question because the answer often tells you where crisis readiness still needs work. Thank you for joining me today on the Morning Endurance Call. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, join the free endurance community. That is where I'm sharing additional resources, tools, live learning, and ongoing conversations for business owners, executives, and practitioners who want to build stronger businesses through preparedness, leadership, and endurance. The link is in the description below. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about why decision making fails under pressure, because many crisis problems are not caused only by the incident itself, but by how decisions break down when the stakes rise. Until then, think clearly, prepare deliberately, lead with endurance. Thank you for joining. Bye now.